only drug queen pin to break into the top 10 drug lord earners.
The cocaine godfather Miss Blanco, with wealth of United States dollars billions plus, WHO killed about 250 people in here drugs business. Born on February 15, 1943, in the port city of Cartagena, Colombia, Griselda Blanco Restrepo entered a world marred by violence, poverty, and deep societal divides. Her early life in the barrios of Colombia was defined by severe deprivation and a lack of stability. Blanco's mother, Ana Lucia Restrepo, moved the family to Medellín when Griselda was still a young child. The city, destined to become infamous for its future as a center of the cocaine trade, was already a crucible of crime and destitution. Life for young Griselda was unforgiving, and she witnessed violence that would later seem to echo in her own adult life. The details of Griselda's early years are cloaked in both myth and stark reality. By the age of 11, she was allegedly participating in criminal activities. A particularly grim story recounts her involvement in a kidnapping gone awry, where she is said to have shot and killed a child who resisted. Whether apocryphal or true, such tales underscored her burgeoning reputation as ruthless and unflinching. In the shadow of Medellín's barrios, the young Blanco adapted to a life where survival required brutality. Her formative years included thefts, hustles, and the grim education of the street that hardened her to the concept of human life as expendable. As she transitioned into adulthood, Griselda's ambitions grew. She was not content with the petty thievery of her childhood. She wanted to command the same kind of respect and fear she had seen among the gang leaders of Medellín. Blanco's entry into the drug trade in the late 1960s set the stage for her ascension. Initially, she worked under the tutelage of traffickers who were starting to see cocaine as the new cash crop, far surpassing marijuana in profitability. Her relationships during this time were marked by violence and exploitation. Blanco married multiple times, with each husband playing a role in her criminal rise. Her first known husband, Carlos Trujillo, was involved in petty crimes. Their union produced 3 sons, Dixon, Uber, and Osvaldo. Their lives, overshadowed by the blood-stained path their mother carved, would end in tragedy, each meeting violent fates linked to their mother's legacy. Griselda's second marriage, to Alberto Bravo, propelled her into the heart of the cocaine trade. Bravo introduced her to the logistics of smuggling and distribution, and together they moved operations to New York City. The mid-1970s were a transformative period for the cocaine industry in the US, and Blanco's organization took full advantage of the burgeoning demand. Using innovative techniques, she masterminded smuggling operations that involved hidden compartments in women's undergarments, false-bottomed suitcases, and even body carriers, mules who ingested drug-filled capsules to evade customs inspections. The wealth accumulated by Blanco during this era was staggering. By conservative estimates, her net worth surged past $2 billion, derived from an operation that was bringing in an estimated $80 million a month. Her empire made her one of the most powerful figures in the drug trade, alongside names like Pablo Escobar. However, unlike Escobar, whose public persona oscillated between that of a Robin Hood-like figure and a feared killer, Blanco's reputation was one-dimensional. She was brutal. She orchestrated assassinations with cold precision, authorizing murders that ranged from rival dealers to anyone suspected of disloyalty within her own ranks. Her notorious motorcycle assassins, hitmen who carried out killings from the back of speeding motorcycles, became a hallmark of the bloody drug wars that ravaged Miami in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Blanco's name, feared by many, was synonymous with death. It is believed she was responsible for at least 200 murders, though some estimates put the number even higher. Stories circulated about her methods, killing informants, rivals, and even those who simply annoyed her. Blanco was alleged to have ordered hits on people for perceived slights, including a former lover who dared cross her. Her third husband, Dario Sepulveda, was not exempt. After their relationship soured, Sepulveda reportedly attempted to take their youngest son, Michael Corleone Blanco, away from her. Griselda's response was swift. Sepulveda was ambushed and killed. This was in keeping with her reputation as La Madrina, or the Godmother, a woman who ruled with an iron fist, where betrayal was met with swift and merciless retribution. Despite her notoriety as a killer, there were still facets of her life that showcased contradictions. Blanco was known to dote on her children, particularly Michael, whom she named after the character from The Godfather, a telling indication of her view of herself as a mob queen. She lavished them with luxury, but her love was as twisted as her empire, embedding them in a world of danger from which there was no escape. All of her sons from her first marriage would later fall victim to violence, perpetuating the cycle of death that had surrounded their mother. Her wealth facilitated a lifestyle that teetered on the edge of decadence and paranoia. Blanco resided in sprawling mansions with armed guards, fortified walls, and lavish interiors filled with imported furnishings and priceless artwork. Unlike some cartel leaders who preferred anonymity, Blanco flaunted her power with impunity. She was known to travel on private jets, surrounded by bodyguards, and attended parties that doubled as exhibitions of her untouchable status. Yet, beneath the extravagance was a life gripped by paranoia. She knew her enemies were legion, and her reign was marked by an ever-present fear of assassination. Her living quarters were always equipped with hidden compartments and escape routes. For Griselda, even the most luxurious bath came with the sound of guards' footsteps echoing outside. Her operations extended far beyond the borders of the United States. Blanco maintained networks in Colombia, Mexico, Panama, and even Europe. The logistics of moving cocaine across continents required an intelligence network that could rival governmental agencies. Although her business was predicated on violence, it was also built on ingenuity. She created coded communication channels, bribed officials across different levels of law enforcement, and manipulated legal systems to her advantage. Blanco spoke fluent Spanish and was known to have a command of English, which facilitated her dealings across borders. Her life, however, was not insulated from scandal and gossip. Rumors circulated that she had a string of lovers and engaged in relationships that were purely transactional, serving either to solidify her power or fulfill her desires. She was known to be bisexual, a rarity in the macho culture of the drug trade, and reports of wild orgies further fueled her fearsome reputation. Blanco's public persona was that of a woman who cared little for societal norms, openly engaging in relationships that blurred the lines between business and pleasure. Whether she was with men or women, her partners were seen as disposable. Another manifestation of her power, religion, surprisingly, played a significant role in her life. Blanco was a devout Catholic, though her actions were anything but Christian. This paradox illustrated the complex nature of her belief system. She would often pray before ordering a murder or attending a church service after orchestrating a shipment of cocaine to those outside her sphere. It was an unfathomable contradiction. To her, it was just another layer of a life built on dichotomy. By the 1980s, Blanco's empire was beginning to show cracks. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, under increasing pressure from the federal government, launched more aggressive operations against cartel leaders. Blanco's notoriety had made her a high-profile target. In 1985, after years of surveillance and investigation, Blanco was arrested in California. The case against her was formidable, bolstered by testimony from former associates and evidence that linked her to murders, drug smuggling, and racketeering. Despite facing charges that could have secured a life sentence, Blanco managed to navigate the legal system in her favor. A mix of plea bargains, witness disappearances, and alleged bribery resulted in a conviction that saw her sentenced to only 20 years in prison. While incarcerated, Blanco's influence did not wane. Reports emerged that she continued to run aspects of her empire from behind bars, issuing orders through intermediaries and maintaining a certain level of control. Her reputation within the prison walls was as formidable as it was outside. Inmates, aware of her legacy, often regarded her with a mix of awe and fear. She spent her prison years under the watchful eyes of authorities, Yet even in the confines of a cell, she managed to maintain an air of power. In 2004, Blanco was released from prison and deported to Colombia. By then, her empire had long since crumbled, overtaken by younger, more ambitious cartels that used her playbook as a foundation for their operations. Despite being older and theoretically wiser, she remained a divisive figure. Some accounts suggest she lived quietly in Medellín, marked by a semblance of newfound humility. Others claim she attempted a quiet resurgence, though nowhere near the scale of her past exploits. Blanco's final years were spent in a country that had evolved as much as she had deteriorated. The Medellín she returned to was not the same as the one she had ruled. Violence still existed, but the power dynamics had shifted. On September 3, 2012, Griselda Blanco's story came to a violent end befitting her life. As she stepped out of a butcher's shop, two gunmen on a motorcycle approached. It was an assassination method she had pioneered, and it now came full circle to claim her own life. The irony was not lost on those who knew her story. The legacy of Griselda Blanco is a complicated one. She is remembered as a trailblazer in an industry dominated by men, a testament to her strategic mind and ruthlessness. She was both admired and reviled, with an impact that resonated far beyond the streets of Medellín and Miami. To some, she was the ultimate symbol of ambition turned monstrous. To others, she was an icon of feminine power, proving that gender was no barrier to leading an empire of blood and cocaine. Her story endures in popular culture, inspiring books, documentaries, and films that explore the duality of her existence. A woman capable of immense cruelty yet commanding respect in an unforgiving world. Michael Corleone Blanco, her surviving son, has since tried to reshape his mother's image and build a life beyond the shadows cast by her legend. Whether seen as a cautionary tale or a study in ambition and power, Griselda Blanco's life remains an indelible part of the dark tapestry of the global drug trade. After Griselda Blanco's murder in 2012, the wealth she left behind was difficult to quantify accurately. Estimates of her net worth during the height of her power in the 1970s and 1980s reached over $2 billion, accumulated from her drug trafficking empire. However, by the time of her death, much of this fortune had been eroded due to years of legal battles, seizures by law enforcement, and the collapse of her drug network after her imprisonment. The exact amount of wealth she left behind remains murky, largely because it was likely held in untraceable assets, hidden accounts, or distributed among associates and family members, beneficiaries of her wealth. The primary beneficiaries of any remaining assets would have been her surviving family members, most notably her youngest son, Michael Corleone Blanco. After Griselda's death, Michael became a key figure in trying to reshape the legacy left by his mother. Instead of continuing in the cocaine trade, Michael sought to legitimize the family name by venturing into business and popular culture. He founded Pure Blanco, a lifestyle and clothing brand that capitalized on the notoriety of his mother's name, catering to those fascinated by the narco culture aesthetic. Through this venture, Michael sought to distance himself from the violence and chaos of the past while still acknowledging its influence on his life. Griselda's other sons, Dixon, Uber, and Osvaldo, who were born from her first marriage, did not fare as well. They all met tragic fates linked to violence, either as a consequence of their involvement in the drug trade or due to rivalries related to their mother's notoriety. Their deaths came in various circumstances over the years, adding to the legacy of loss surrounding the Blanco family. The surviving family members. Michael Corleone Blanco was the last of her children to remain alive after his brother's deaths. Born during Griselda's peak years in Miami, Michael witnessed firsthand the violence and lavish lifestyle that characterized his mother's reign. After her deportation to Colombia and eventual death, he became the most visible face of the Blanco legacy. He has been open in interviews about his attempts to transition away from the drug trade, speaking publicly about the trauma and complicated history of growing up under Griselda Blanco. Through Pure Blanco and his participation in reality TV shows such as Cartel Crew on VH1, Michael has shared his story with audiences curious about life after the fall of one of the most Feared drug empires. Griselda's extended family, including siblings and other relatives, have largely stayed out of the spotlight, and not much is known about their lives after her death. Any potential involvement in the drug trade by more distant relatives has not been widely documented. Most reports suggest that the remnants of her direct family focused on moving away from the violent and chaotic lifestyle that defined her era. Continued criminal activity. There have been no credible reports to indicate that any surviving members of her family continued in the drug trade at the scale or notoriety that Griselda commanded. While rumors and whispers have emerged about possible ties to criminal activities among more distant relatives, none have been substantiated in a significant way. The Medellín drug world in which Griselda thrived has also changed dramatically since her time. The cartels splintered into smaller, more covert operations, and new generations of traffickers arose who had little to no connection with the Blancos. For Michael Corleone Blanco, in particular, the decision to pursue legitimate business opportunities rather than criminal ones seemed intentional. He openly discussed the toll that his mother's lifestyle took on him and his siblings, emphasizing the desire to break the cycle of violence and illegality. His brand and public appearances are part of a broader attempt to reclaim the family narrative, without resorting to the bloody legacy left by his mother. Where are they now? Michael Corleone Blanco, the most visible of Griselda's descendants. Michael continues to run Pure Blanco and make media appearances. His participation in Cartel Crew gave viewers insight into his life post-cartel, showcasing his efforts to redefine his family's legacy and live a more peaceful, albeit complex, life. Other relatives. While Griselda had siblings and extended family, little has been publicly recorded about their lives after her murder. Most of her close family that played significant roles in her drug empire either predeceased her or chose to remain under the radar to avoid public and law enforcement attention. The fate of Griselda's wealth. What remained of Griselda's once vast fortune was likely dispersed and fragmented. The US government, along with Colombian and international authorities, seized significant portions of her assets during various investigations and arrests. Real estate, offshore accounts, and tangible luxury items were either confiscated or lost due to legal entanglements and the cost of maintaining her defense over the years. Some of her wealth might have been hidden and never recovered, potentially remaining in the hands of trusted associates or passed along to Michael. However, the continuous pressure from law enforcement, as well as Griselda's imprisonment and subsequent loss of control over her empire, greatly reduced her financial power by the time of her release from prison in 2004. Griselda's legacy. Griselda Blanco's legacy is multifaceted and deeply polarizing. She is remembered as both a pioneering figure in the cocaine industry and a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition. Her name carries weight as a symbol of ruthless power and the extreme risks associated with the drug trade. Michael's efforts to reframe that legacy into something more positive, through fashion and media representation, highlight the complexities of escaping the shadow of such an infamous figure. In Medellín, where she was both feared and begrudgingly respected, her death marked the end of an era. Today, most members of the Blanco family who are still alive seem to have taken steps to live more subdued and private lives, away from the criminal underworld that brought both immense fortune and devastating loss. While the story of Griselda Blanco ended on the streets of Medellín, the echoes of her reign continue to capture the fascination of people intrigued by the dark allure of the narco world, whether as the protagonist of documentaries, dramatizations, or the subject of Michael's attempts to reconcile his upbringing. The tale of La Madrina endures as the potent reminder of the rise and fall of a drug queen whose life was as volatile as the empire she built.